I would like to move now to Chaker Khazaal. Princess in Kokon was wanted to migrate for a better life. You didn't even decide. You were born a refugee in a Palestinian refugee camp where your grandfather had arrived when he was 12, I think.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us what it is to grow up in a refugee camp? What is the life like in a refugee camp where you were? It was a big refugee camp. How many people lived there?
It was 25,000 people in 1 kilometer square. It's Burj al Barajni camp in Beirut. So yeah, I was born a refugee. I didn't choose or migrate myself. My grandfather and their generation were forced to flee in 1948 from the northern part of Palestine to Lebanon. And I was born and I didn't understand what it means to be a refugee. And even actually until today, I try to understand what it is to be a refugee.
Did your parents explain to you what it was a refugee?
I mean, when you grow up in the camp,
everybody's a refugee.
Yeah, it's like everybody around you is a refugee. You hear a lot of stories. The only concept of refugee I grasped was when my grandfather always talked about his village back in Palestine. And even on his deathbed, he was at the hospital in the camp and he was talking about Tarshiha, which I visited for the first time last year. That holding a travel document as a Palestinian refugee, it's so hard to travel. So the first time I was invited to a conference, and I was a little kid, I did a movie with a Palestinian filmmaker, and they wanted to show it in Norway. And this is when I understood what it is to be a refugee. I don't want to talk a lot about how hard it is to live in a refugee camp, because especially this year, we're seeing a lot of pictures, videos, footage. Social media is giving you, a lot of info. So if any one of you don't know how hard it is to live in a refugee camp, we have a big problem. I want to talk about, and this is important for me today, to change the rhetoric, how amazing it is in a refugee camp. There are a lot of dreamers. I travel back every year now. When you live in hard circumstances, you become like a really strong dreamer and so determined to do something in life. I can give like millions of examples today of a dancer, for example, a friend of mine, who goes out of the camp, dances at weddings, and this is his source of income because he can't work since he is a refugee in Lebanon. It's really a closed community where everyone knows everyone. So if your parents have a fight, the whole 25,000 people will know about it. I want to talk about also people fall in love in refugee camps, and I had my first kiss when I was like 8, and this is also something that, today the media and everything, they victimize us way too much, that we need to put this voice forward, because refugee has been associated a lot with the feelings of fear, and to fear us. No, it's regular people. We watched the World Cup in 1994 between Italy and Brazil. People were like, my mother was yelling, she's supporting Italy, our neighbors supporting Brazil. Italy won, I think. Yeah, I can't remember now. This is the day I had my first kiss, by the way. And we played soccer even when there was a flood in the winter, and the camp, we didn't have still today, there's no sewage structure. Still, we got like a soccer ball, and we would go in the small alleys and play. We did plays and theater in the camp. There was so much of these things that actually now I don't live in a refugee camp, and I haven't lived for so long, but I miss a lot of things there. If you ask me, would I prefer to have a better structure for the refugee camp? And of course, and this is important today, people deserve to live a good standard life. And I'm not saying people should stay in refugee camps, but I think big part of the responsibility, whether it's in my books or articles, is to break that stigma. we dress nice. We always, my mother took care of her hair and makeup, and so did our neighbors. And that's where the change of narrative is so important. And this is what I want to bring to this conference today, to start talking about these lovely experiences that happen in the worst places in this world today.
But if you are able to tell us your story and to write it, because you have become a writer and you have written books about this, it's because eventually you were able to go out of this camp because you had a scholarship. Yes,
Yeah.
tell us how you
Yeah,
managed.
first I got a scholarship from a Lebanese school and then a scholarship by Canada. And in Bush camp and as Palestinians, I mean, we've been refugees since 1948. A lot of amazing people from Canada and from Europe came to as volunteers and help. And a lot of them helped us out in so many ways to apply for, like my scholarship, I knew about it from one of the volunteers. So as soon as you give a refugee the opportunity, then you get two in one. You get that bottled dreaming and oppression, plus that window of light. You make something amazing out of it. But the more you fear a refugee, the more we're gonna actually have unpleasant, consequences. Because a desperate group of people is not a healthy environment for our entire international community.
And just to finish on your personal story, because you became, thanks to this scholarship, you went to Canada, you became a Canadian citizen, and that allowed you to go to the place of birth of your grandfather, where you had never been, and I guess your parents either had.
My parents are not allowed to go back to northern Palestine till today. And this was one of the things last year, and I wrote an article in the HuffPost about it, is going back and tracing down where my grandfather's house was. And I found the oldest man in the village and ended up talking about 1948 with him. And I found the house, I found some of the neighbors. And for me, it was closure and validity of stories that, that history will not forget because there are witnesses to it. And now I'm a witness that I'll tell my kids about it. And of course, I want to thank really Canada and every country today that's taking in refugees and migrants, because you're giving an opportunity for someone not only to become a good citizen of your own country, but it's also like eliminating one less sad person in the world.
Thank you. And
Thank you.